Good evening, Chesterfield County, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here tonight for the final in our three-part series on our budget town halls. We're excited to have you here with us today as we begin to talk about the 2021-22 school year and looking at the operational budget that will fund our operations for that school year. My name is Tim Bullis. I work with the Communications and Community Engagement team in Chesterfield County Public Schools, and I have the pleasure of serving as tonight's moderator for the event. Again, we appreciate you taking time out of your schedule tonight to join us. We apologize that we did have to delay one night. It's already been a very eventful week for us. Our first and hopefully only snowfall of the year. We're done with snow days. And our return of elementary school students to school today. A very successful day all around. We do want to point out that tonight's event is focused strictly on the FY22 operating budget. Again, that operating budget that will fund our operations for the 2021-22 school year. You'll notice that we have 8 people up here on stage tonight. So we'll take turns answering your questions. We'll start with a presentation first. It's good to note, and you'll be happy to hear this, that of the 107 slides we showed 2 weeks ago at the school board meeting, we're down to about 75. So hopefully we won't take up too much of your time, but we did want to provide information so that you all can make informed decisions and have educated conversations about the operations of the school division. You'll notice up here tonight that we're all masked. We will stay masked, and we will continue to adjust the mask, which seems to move every time you talk. Please forgive us for that. If you do need an accommodation to be able to hear and understand this, we encourage you on your Facebook page or on your YouTube channel to turn on your closed captioning so that you can understand what the discussion is tonight. So again, we're here tonight to talk about the operating budget for the proposed operating budget for the fiscal 21-22 school year. That budget includes operations, it includes salary, and it includes everything that we do in the teaching and learning field. You'll hear a variety of information about the operational budget that Mr. Meister will present to you. And then at the end, in the last 45 minutes, we'll take questions that have been pre-submitted, and we'll also take questions that are joining from those who are joining us in the chat rooms on social media. So with that in mind, let's introduce our panel and everybody who's here with us tonight. To my right, to your left, we'll start at the far end, our Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Thomas Taylor, our Chief Finance Officer, Mr. Bob Meister, our Bermuda District School Board Member, Ms. Ann Coker, our Superintendent, Dr. Merv Doherty, our Dale District School Board Representative, Debbie Bailey, our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Sharon Pope, and our Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Josh Davis. We appreciate them for taking time out of their schedules tonight to join us. Again, this is the third of a series of 3 town hall meetings. The school board earlier tonight had its second budget work session. This one was focused on compensation for staff. If you missed that, it was an extremely important conversation. We will be re-airing it tomorrow on Facebook, and it is available on Swagit, which is available through Board Docs. It's the crux of this budget process that we're going through. The priority, number one, is to adjust the teacher salary scale and to make sure that we're paying them a wage, the leaders of tomorrow, a wage that is both respectable and shows the value that they perform in this school division. So with that, we'll turn it over to Ms. Coker for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Tim. And thank you to staff for putting this presentation together and for conducting this third town hall. And thank you to the audience out there watching this evening. I think it is highly important and for everybody to be engaged as we talk through this budget process. This is the time of year where the school board or the superintendent issues a needs-based budget to the school board. And over the next 4 weeks, we will be reviewing the budget and looking at the needs that have been proposed and asking questions and diving a little deeper into the budget. And then after the final budget is approved, then it will go to the Board of Supervisors for their review. So it's important that everyone understands what that process looks like. As Tim mentioned, Mr. Bullis mentioned earlier, decompression is our #1 focus. We did have a very good work session just a little while ago, and our chair, Mr. Harder, made a comment that kind of resonates, that this has been an issue for a decade or so, and it's time that we take a peek and look at this so we don't kick this issue down the road anymore, because there is no more road. We need to focus on phase one of decompression, and this presentation will cover that. And at this time, I'll pass it to Dr. Doherty for the presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Coker. So you'll see a continuing theme in our presentation. Our number one priority is addressing teacher decompression, and number two, meeting the needs of our students and staff. We have some outstanding teachers in our system, outstanding educators throughout our schools, people who love your children, care about what happens to them, and as a fully accredited school district, it's hard to find in Virginia anyone to compare with us and the things that we do and the opportunities that we give our children. And so the number one priority, again, is addressing decompression. And I will say this right off the bat. We cannot fail our budget with this priority. We must pass our budget. We must send it to the Board of Supervisors, and we must move forward in paying our teachers, our educators, the people who work in our schools, work throughout our system, the market value. So we are competitive in a very difficult and challenging field where you see less and less people going into education. And I think our children deserve it, and I know our staff deserve the opportunity to be paid an appropriate salary as they continue to educate the children and the leaders of tomorrow. So we are looking at us a little closer here, and our population has changed over the 20 years. We are now a minority-majority school district, very diverse population, a melting pot of our country. And as you see the numbers here, you will notice that our population has changed, and this is a good thing for Chesterfield County as we continue to grow in a very diverse way and continue to look at the opportunities that our children have with all diverse populations. Since 2010, we will let you know that our low-income families our students have increased 55%. Our English language learners have increased 141%, and our special education students have increased 9%. And with the challenges that we have to make sure that we meet the needs of our children when they come in, it doesn't matter if it's students with disability, students speaking another language, which we have 101 languages in Chesterfield County, or if it's students who right now their families are having a hard time and they're living to give free and reduced lunch. The issue is it should not matter, or should your zip code determine your outcome of life. And we mean all means all in Chesterfield County, and that means that every child that comes to us deserves the best education possible. And with the quality teachers that we have, we want to continue to keep the teachers to make sure our children have a very equitable opportunity to move forward. So a family of four individuals will qualify for the free lunch program if they make $34,000 or less. So 38% of our student population at this time, and we believe it's going to go to 40% in the very near future, of our students meet this free and reduced lunch program qualification. That is more students than the total number of enrollment for Richmond Public Schools. And our free and reduced lunch population is not located in one area. It goes through all of the magisterial districts of our school district. So what are our challenges ahead? We know that the last 10 months have been extremely challenging. We were excited today to see our students back in the classroom. We're excited over the next several weeks to get all of our students back into the buildings. And we know that as we look to the future and look to see what's going on, these challenges are going to come to us with students who are dealing with some academic loss, dealing with some social and emotional issues, mental health issues. Today we were out and about, it was exciting. They were excited to see their teachers, excited to see their friends, and decided to be in the classroom, really engaged in learning. And it was just a joy to see our students back in the building. But we know there are challenges ahead. Last year's budget, we were able to put more staff members into the building. Now, to keep those staff members in the building, we have to pay them. And we have to pay our staff members in Chesterfield County. We also know that we have more students who speak another language. They come to us, their families themselves speak another language in English. As I said, 101 different languages. We know that our special ed population, especially with changes that have occurred from the federal government and state law, that our IEPs have changed, and we must make sure that we have the staff that's needed, plus the resources that are needed to help all of our students grow. And that we know that student health and wellness is extremely important, and we want to make sure that we have the staff members to deal with health conditions, deal with this idea of trauma that's occurring, the idea of isolation that had occurred during this time, that our students know that the schools are a safe place, a place that we want them, and a place that we encourage them to come to be engaged in learning. I talked about mental health. A significant number of our students, living at home, staying at home all the time, not only the students, but the families, and dealing with this issue and experiencing more trauma than usual. And it was great that over the past 2 years, we've been working on our trauma-informed care programs and information we can do to help our students. That's why we put more counselors in the building, nurses in the building to help with this. But we also have to know that we do a lot of threat assessments, and we never want a child to look at self-harm or hurting others. The high-quality teachers, and if you've been in our classrooms or throughout the school system, we have outstanding teachers, high-quality teachers, and we are not competitive in the marketplace. And so we see a movement of teachers, not that they want to leave Chesterfield, but you can't blame them for leaving when they can make quite a bit more money in other school districts around us. And you will see that figure tonight. We are losing quality teachers due to the lack of pay. And we know that differentiated support is extremely important. We do not want to meet the minimal standards of staffing. We want to make sure that our schools are staffed to the appropriate piece where they're helping our students, not just in the classroom, but in support services and extracurricular activities within the school. So when we look at balancing objectives, again, our priority deals with addressing teacher decompression and meeting the needs of our students and staff. I'm going to turn this over now to Bob Meister to give, I'm sorry, let me finish this here. I apologize. So I have a legal requirement. Someone would say, why would you ask for a budget that is more money than you think that you can get from the Board of Supervisors? Well, under Virginia Code Section 22.1-92, it states that I am duly authorized to submit to the school board the needs of our school district. And for the past 12 years, these needs have been neglected since 2008. And last year we submitted the budget, and this year we're submitting the budget. And it will look very similar to last year, because if it was important last year, it's important this year. And we're trying to meet the needs of our staff and students. But again, the number one priority is we must pay our teachers appropriate salaries. The budget process. So as Ms. Coker talked about earlier, this is just a chart for you to see and to study. But November, we met quite a bit with the budget planning process. We saw the governor's proposed budget to the state. This January and February, we had an opportunity to work on the superintendent's proposed budget and send it to the board, which they will vote on at the end of this month. And then we will send it to the Board of Supervisors for their approval in March and the adoption in April. And so our opportunity is a very short window. We want to make sure that we're very clear on the needs of our school district and the opportunity we have to make sure that you know that what we're asking for goes into the classroom, into the schools, to support your child and the improvement in their education. Some of you may know about the local composite index, and it basically, the state looks at a school system and decides the value of the county that the school system's in, and that determines how much the state will give to us and how much the county should appropriate to the school system. It was recalculated last year. It has not changed, and we're in the second year of the biennium, and so the value of the the school system, the value of what the county can offer, and what the state will give is basically the same percentage. So the following objectives have not changed from last year, and what we're looking at is the opportunity to know that if we do not look at this expense now, it will continue to grow each year. We must not, as Ann said, kick the can down the road any longer. We have to address them now. So we know that there's a national teacher shortage. We know that since the housing market in 2008, the school system has not recovered financially. We know that there's only so much money, but we believe that the funding is available to support this budget. Very little cost the same 10 years ago, even 20 years ago. So there is a cost of doing business, and when you see our budget, not only in the fact of paying our teachers and our staff members the appropriate salary, but also looking at the things that we have to pay for on a yearly basis, there is a cost of doing business. And we know that the needs of our school district will continue to grow. We also know that we have mandates and compliance under state and federal laws that we must follow, either if it's from state money or federal money or guidelines that we have. And we want to make sure that we just don't meet the standards, but we surpass the standards, because it improves our students, it improves the education in the classroom, and it makes our entire school system a much better place to work and educate. And we know that one of the requirements that we want to excel in is looking at our staffing levels in our schools. And also, we realize that much of what we're looking at and opportunities that we have deals with teacher salaries. So when you're looking at compensation, according to the Virginia Education Association, teacher pay in Virginia ranks 33rd in the country. The average annual teacher salary in Virginia is $53,267. That's a little over $9,000 below the national average. This cannot continue if we're going to be competitive not only in the state but in the country. So a first-year teacher in Chesterfield County makes $45,792. A national teacher salary, average teacher salary is $61,730. Chesterfield County teacher is not paid the national average until they reach service year 31. Think about that, until year 31. And you're going to see charts and graphs on the salary scale and what we have compared to school systems that are comparable to us on how far we are behind. And at this time, I will now turn it over to Bob Meister.
Thank you, Dr. Doherty. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to the community today about what we have in our budget. Before I get too deep into what is proposed this year, I want to talk for a moment about how Chesterfield County compares to some peer counties and cities in the area. What this is from the state collection circa fiscal year 2019, the most recent data available. And this looks at Chesterfield and various other comparable counties across the state, including the state average, on a number of aspects of what is in our operating plan. The first one of these we'll look at is administration. This would be essentially central office, other folks. You can see Chesterfield ranks at the bottom here, $404. This is per pupil expenditure, so this is all rebaseline per each student, so you get a sort of apples to apples across different districts. You can see Chesterfield here at $400, state average of about $700, well below the state average. Really excellent bang for the buck in the administrative area, but we must keep in mind that this is not necessarily sustainable either as we look across the various expenses for the other counties. Moving into operations and maintenance, you can see Chesterfield at about $870, state average of about $1,200 per pupil. Mr. Davis will talk a little later, I'm sure, about some of our aging infrastructure and the needs of those buildings. It's great work that he and his team have done to maintain these buildings at this low of a cost, although it is not sustainable, and you'll see as we go through our initiatives a few items that will help address this as well. Pupil transportation, about $649, more middle of the pack versus comparables. Here we have put some more investment into our transportation and new buses over the last several years. That's starting to make us look a little bit more like the average here, but still below by about $100 per pupil, the state average on per pupil transportation costs. Now the one you're all waiting for, instruction. This would be the folks that are in the classroom and in the buildings. You can see Chesterfield, not quite at the bottom, but pretty close at about $8,000 per pupil. State average is all the way up at $9,700, so almost $1,700 below state average for instruction. I'll pause for a moment on this one because as we think about instruction, Chesterfield County has delivered exceptional instruction and 100% accreditation to our schools. And we're doing it really on a shoestring here, right? $8,000 versus a state average that's a lot higher. So many kudos to those in the classroom, those in the schools to ensure that we are delivering that great education, but we're doing it on a shoestring. And one of the things that we're going to address, or we're going to try to address in this budget, is that teacher compensation to help move this a little bit closer to where it needs to be. The final comparison here on this metric, we'll look at all of those previous items added together, so operations, administration, et cetera. It puts us just under $10,000, $9,987 here in Chesterfield. If you look at the state average, that's closer to $12,000. So once again, fantastic results for Chesterfield County, but we're really doing this on a shoestring, and I would argue that this is not necessarily a sustainable model to continue that great performance into the future. One of the other ways we can look at this is how much funding are we getting on a per pupil basis from our localities. Obviously, our budget consists of monies that we get from the state and monies that we get from our localities. This looks at the piece that is directly related to the localities. So Chesterfield gets a little over $4,000 from their localities. You can see across comparables here, near the bottom of the pack in terms of these comparables. Norfolk a little bit below us, state average way up above $6,000 per pupil expenditures here. So definitely some room for the county to look at and think of how much can we help out the schools and really help the teacher compression issue, help other items that we're going to talk about over the course of this budget cycle. So once again, what is our focus point? You heard Dr. Doherty talk about this. I'll reiterate it here. Our number one priority as we look at this budget is addressing teacher decompression. You'll hear that over and over. We'll talk a little bit more about that here. Not to forget about the other needs, of course. We have needs of student staff that are also reflected here, but I must reiterate, ultimately delivering teacher decompression improvements is really the focus of this budget. Why is that? Because teaching is a profession that creates all other professions. I love that quote from Mr. Dufour here. We need to make sure that we are investing in our teachers and in our classrooms where that impact is the greatest. So you heard talk about a salary study. We had an excellent presentation earlier today in our budget working session around the pay study. I'll bring out a few of those slides here today. But one of the things that we did realize as we looked at that study is that, our starting teacher pay is about at market average. It's a little bit below, but our problem is how that pay progresses over the course of a CCPS teacher's career. One example, if you're a CCPS teacher with a master's degree, over the course of a 35-year career, you will earn 10% less than the comparable market average. 10% doesn't sound like much. You put that in real dollar terms, that's somewhere around $230,000 to $240,000. You can do a lot, obviously, with $230,000 or $40,000, and that's a cost that our teachers are foregoing for working and teaching your kids here in Chesterfield County. This is not just a teacher issue. This exists in school-based administrators, paraprofessionals, other support staff as well, and we'll look to address those in part through the compensation study and as part through what I'll call a phase 4 also as we go forward. So one of the other things this pay study did was it took a look and it talked to our teachers about why they stay here, why they come, why they go. So why do teachers come to Chesterfield County? The two most common answers were location and reputation of this district. Salary was not among the top 3 reasons. So why do teachers stay in Chesterfield County? Coworkers, right? I mentioned great teachers. They really like working with those great teachers as well. And location was the 2 most cited reasons. Less than 5% of our responders said that they stayed because of pay. But why do teachers and school professionals leave? Better salary and opportunities for a better salary were the top 2 reasons cited. 80% plus of the respondents said the major reason they leave is for a better salary. So why do people come here? Location and reputation. Why do people stay? Coworkers and location. Why do they go? It's very clearly from the study and from the survey, it's a salary issue. And we need to make sure that we're doing right by our teachers and keeping those excellent teachers in Chesterfield where they can enjoy some of those other benefits we've talked about. So let's put a little bit of numbers behind that. What this graph shows is for one particular lane of a teacher's career. This would be the master's pay lane. The green line here shows what a Chesterfield teacher will make over their career if they stay in Chesterfield. You notice that it stays relatively flat for the first 15 or 16 years before eventually starting to rise. The market average, that light blue line, is what they could make at other districts or other areas that were viewed as comparable. You can see that gap is pretty narrow in the first year or two, but it starts to widen dramatically as you go forward. And this is where you would look at and you'd say that would be about that $240,000 gap over the course of a teacher's career. One other way to look at that is if you look at this particular group of teachers, a first-year teacher, you heard Dr. Doherty say, will make $45,792 in Chesterfield. 5 years later, they will make $47,000 and change, a little bit more than 3% increase. 10 years after they start, they'll make $48,600, or about $2,800. So over a 10-year period, they'll only make 6% more than a first-year teacher. This is really some numbers to that really flat part of the curve. And one of the things as we look at the salary study and what it really told us is that we need to make sure that we're moving these teachers up this curve and making sure that we're paying them appropriately once they get here. So the recommendation from the consultants that we'll see throughout this rest of this deck is really to do that over 3 phases, right? The first phase, we won't do a whole lot with the starting salary, very minor adjustments there, but it's really about remedying pay compression. This is about putting teachers on the right point in that pay scale to ensure that they are progressing appropriately with at least 1% per step progression each year. You put all that together, that's about a 6% increase in phase 1. Phase 2 starts to look at that starting point and starts to maintain competitiveness at the beginning, as well as continuing to advance those teachers up that pay scale. And phase 3 does similar items. These will be, if funding exists, phased in over the next 3 years. Not shown here would be a phase 4 for those really valuable folks in our district that weren't part of the study. So the study, as I mentioned, was largely teachers and school-based instructional personnel. What this didn't account for was the incredibly valuable support staff, including food service, bus drivers, custodians, et cetera, those folks that are really form the backbone of the organization aside from the teachers. We aren't forgetting about them, but we need to ensure that we're phasing this in over the course of time, and they will be addressed as part of what will be a future phase 4. Of course, this has a price tag on it. If you look at this, you can see the bulk of this is really teachers, right? Year 1, we're looking at a price tag of about $23 million in year 1. This isn't a one-time cost, of course. This would be something that would continue. So it would be $23 million in year 1, 2, 3 for phase 1. You look at phase 2, about 14 at phase 3, about 9.5 for a total cost of about $46.7 million over the course of the 3 years. This is not just salary. This includes things like benefits and insurance and FICA tax, et cetera. But this $23.2 million, as we talk about our budget priorities this year, that $23.2 is really what we're looking to get funded both this year and going forward in the budget. Turning our attention for a moment away from the salary study, there are a few other key items that we want to talk about. You heard Dr. already talk a little bit about this as well. This is differentiated support. So the division, we're requesting $3 million in FY22 to provide differential funding to our individual schools based on need. We're looking at individual schools and their composition of students, including special education, English language learners, and students with economic hardship. We're looking to supplement those schools with additional funding to help in those classroom needs. That all sounds good. What does that mean? A very busy chart here, but I'll walk through the Bensley and Weaver example at the elementary level. Similar dynamics will play through at the other schools. You see a middle school example and a high school example here. Let's take a look at Bensley first. Nearly second column from the right, you see in FY21, this current year, we allocated just under $35,000 to that school for the principal, et cetera, to spend at their discretion. Weaver, about $42,500. Largely, the difference between Bensley and Weaver was largely based on the projected enrollment of about 597 at Bensley, at 621 at Weaver. With this new model we would propose, we would do two things. One, we would increase the base allocation, so the straight cost per student, and then we'd look at those three categories I mentioned: economic condition, students with disabilities, and English language learners, and provide additional support for each of those students at about $25 each into each of those schools. When you apply that factor, you'll notice that Bensley increases from $34,000 all the way up to $76,000, while Weaver increases still from $42,000 to $57,000. But you start to really address some of those equity challenges within the school by really pointing to the needs of the school, to point to the funding for each of those individual items. You can see examples, as I said, for middle school and high school here. We've got a full set of examples on our website. I'd point you there to look at the impact for your particular school. The other piece we want to look at is differentiated staffing. What this would be a $1.5 million this current fiscal year to provide different levels of staffing and support for those schools with academic, social, emotional, or mental health needs. Why do we do this? Honestly, it's because it works, and we have one fantastic example of this that we did earlier. We look at Ettrick Elementary School. In 2016, they were denied accreditation. So we did an early version of differentiated staffing in that school. We put some more resources in that were targeted for the needs of Ettrick, and just 2 short years later, not only were they accredited, they were a National Title I distinguished school. Dr. Taylor, Dr. Doherty, others will say that is unprecedented in education, and it really speaks miles to what this program could do. So let's not wait for a school to fall into an accreditation hole. Let's get in front of that, and let's differentiate support before we, quote, need to, because we're in trouble. And Ettrick is what a great example of us doing that, and doing that well. So now let's look a little bit more at the budget. This would fund our operations in 21 and 22. Some of you may go, what else is there? What this budget does not count for here would be other sources of funding, including things like our capital improvement plan to help us build and maintain new buildings. It doesn't include our food service budget. It doesn't include a handful of dollars that we get from the federal government on grants. But this is really to address the nuts and bolts of the operation of our business. In order to do that, we first must look at revenue. We are a large organization. We started our budget process looking at today's revenue picture, which is a little bit over $700 million. That'll be what I'll call our base as we go through this. What we then will look at is, how are those various sources of revenue going to change from FY21 into our proposal in FY22? And I'll walk through each of those. As it currently stands, our current projection is we're going to have about $16 million more to spend this year before other changes. Where that's coming from, the first line, what is labeled here as transfers. This is the monies we get from Chesterfield County to help support the schools. You notice in FY21, this current year, that's just a shade under $312 million. We expect that to go in FY22, based on early projections, to just under $320 million, an $8.2 million increase. Local, this is funds that the school division itself collects for fees and other things. We expect this to actually go down next year as we no longer collect fees for things like Chromebooks, et cetera, as we move to more and more reliance on digital learning. The state buckets, if you look at the state number and the sales tax number, we're looking at about a $10 million increase, $9.7 million increase, based on what was the governor's preliminary budget released in December. This comes with an asterisk, as that's still being debated and still in legislators' hands. We hope that we'll land a little bit better than this, but as it stands right now, it's about 9.7 million increase. And then you see some other adjustments here for about a $16 million increase. As I mentioned, the salary study alone cost $23 million, so this $16 million may sound like a lot. It's not going to be enough to cover our needs, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go forward. So if we look at what we expect our expenditures to look like, We start off with a balanced budget, so we start off with that $703 million that we expect in revenue this year. And then we look at the various items that will increase and decrease accordingly. The first chunk of those will be something we'll call non-discretionary. Largely contractual changes or items that are needed to continue to provide the same level of service that we're providing today. The compensation study is the next big piece. And finally, enhancements. These are items that are really designed to improve the operations of the district or improve upon what we do now in the classroom. You put all those together, that's about a $55.6 million increase to our expenditures in Dr. Doherty's needs-based budget, which would leave us with about a $39.6 million deficit. I recognize there are financial realities that we need to address, and I know the board is looking at this with a very keen eye to make sure that we are putting forward a budget that is ultimately reasonable and acceptable to the Board of Supervisors, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But as we look at it today, we are staring at a gap in funding of about $39.6 million that over the course of the next several weeks we'll look to address one way or another. One of those ways that we could consider addressing that is last year we had FY20 for all sorts of weird COVID reasons, among other things. We had a good fiscal year. We were able to save a fair amount of money and return significant amount of money from last year's budget to the county. As a school district in Virginia, we are not allowed to carry this money forward ourselves. We must return that to the county and largely ask them to use that for various purposes later. This $24 million and change represents a portion of that savings that we had last year that we are currently sits unappropriated at the county for potential use. Typically, we'll use this for one-time items. As we go forward, we'll consider whether or not this is a good idea to use at least as a partial down payment for things like the compensation study, et cetera. But we do have a little bit in our kitty to at least help this gap. As I mentioned, I'll talk about the rest of this relatively quickly, but I'll talk about it as compensation, non-discretionary items, and enhancements. Staff compensation, you've heard me say it a couple times already. You've heard Dr. Doherty say it. This is our number one priority. And first and foremost is addressing the salary decompression study. Phase one, as I mentioned, of 4, is $23 million and change to really take that first step in remedying that pay compression issue and moving that forward. I mentioned phase 4 to address those other positions. I don't want to forget about them now. We need to consider the needs of those group and want to make sure that we at least are providing a 2% cost of living adjustment for those positions for things like, again, drivers, food service workers, et cetera, to ensure that we are at least keeping up with inflation for those groups. The next group are what we call non-discretionary items. These are things that are either contractual in nature or otherwise required. First couple of those looks at VRS, our retirement system updates, a little bit under $500,000 expected increase, and healthcare, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic. We expect the employer, our portion of healthcare, to increase by about 5% or about $2.4 million this next year. This is an estimate. We're still working through what this may cost as we go through the various processes, but we expect about a $2.4 million increase for healthcare. Debt service, our cost of what essentially you can think of as mortgage for school construction projects, leases, et cetera. We expect to increase just under $2 million next year. This takes us from about a $58 million debt load, or about 8% of our budget, up to about $60 million over the course of the fiscal year. Utilities increase modestly, $260,000. A part of this is putting a new school online, but generally a small increase in utilities across the board. The next 4 items really speak to a similar theme. I'll speak to them more in total. School counselors, about $1.6 million, a couple instructional aides, nurses, and ESL instructors. The bulk of these positions are positions that we brought into the school this year based on need and funded them through our one-time CARES dollars that we received from the federal government over the course of this year. Needless to say, because that's funded by one-time dollars, we have to, at some point, put these dollars into the operating budget so that these positions, which are very much needed, are able to be funded in perpetuity. We have an increase of about $700,000 from services provided by the county to us. We also have an increase planned of about $2 million for custodial services. This is really the cost of really ensuring we meet the higher standards of cleanliness that we all know are really important in this time of the pandemic, making sure that we meet the cleanliness standards that you are expecting in our buildings. A handful of other items. We expect to continue to increase our contribution for our supplemental retirement program, increased costs for the Children's Services Act, minor changes to grant funds, HR software and ADA costs. I'll pause on this one for a second. $100,000 of this is related to HR software and a maintenance contract to help digitize some of our HR records. You'll hear this with HR, you'll hear this with payroll, you hear this in a lot of other places. Our technology in the school is really lagging. This is step one to help get us into the modern era and help improve our overall technology and, quite frankly, be even more efficient as an organization. We've also included about $50,000 for ADA costs that previously hadn't been budgeted. We are opening the doors for Mosley Elementary School the year following. We need to have a principal and clerical support to help support the onboarding of that school. We expect some modest increases in regional tuition. Transportation, between overtime and additional fuel and maintenance, about $700,000 here. This is really to reflect what we anticipate actual costs to be. Overtime, we traditionally under budget. We're going to actually put in the budget the appropriate amount of overtime, and we'll net that against some vacancies we typically see, but we do need to be mindful as we budget. The Tyler Drive service plan is another one of those software enhancements. Sanitary napkins is a state mandate for female restrooms. And really quickly on enhancements, a number of items here. The ones that I'll talk to really quickly, you've already heard me talk about, which is the $4.5 million related to the differentiated staffing pool and those school-based allocations that I spent a few slides on. We also have an initiative to include a school-based annual substitute in our buildings. This would be a multi-year plan. This would be the first 13 of those to put in this year, and we'll look to phase the rest of the schools in over time. A handful of other items and enhancements that I won't spend a lot of time on. Payroll system is another one of those. Ability to upgrade our software. You'll see maintenance staffing. You'll see some contract extensions for various folks who really can use that extra month at the beginning of the year to meet the needs of our special ed special ed students, construction staffing, PSAT for all, SAT, PSAT for all. That $148,000 was previously funded through some generous donations. That donation runs out this year, so if we want to continue that, that will cost about $150,000 ongoing. A few technology folks, some costs for student email if we want to continue or want to offer that to our students. We're looking at some enhancements to our stipends to a price tag of just under $52,000 and some warehouse leases as well. I mentioned older buildings. There are needs to continue to invest in maintenance, both preventative and major maintenance. There's about $1.9 million or so of additional investment proposed for enhancements for our buildings. And last line I'll talk about here, you can see a number of items. PPE, we need to make sure that we're prepared for whatever next year has to offer. Decodable text, this $93,000 is really important. This would be elementary texts to help advance the cause on that. These are close to 10 years old. It's time to update those. You add that all up, I went through relatively quickly, but this would equal about, as I said, about a $39.6 million deficit. Despite that $39.6 deficit, I will be sure to mention one more time that the top priority of Dr. Doherty, myself, the board, is really to ensure that we deliver that salary decompression, the compensation piece of this, and we'll make sure that that is what lands. In the last minute, I'll give you a couple of quick nuggets on overall metrics. Revenue, we get about 54% of our revenue from the state, about 44% from the county, the remainder from local or other sources. So you can see here that the bulk of our funding actually comes from the state. We can look to the county to contribute about 44%. We'd love for that to be a little bit higher. Expenditures, not surprisingly, if you look at this by category, Instruction at close to 70% is the main bucket here. Another 8% is eaten up by debt service, and the remainder are technology, operations, transportation, et cetera. But really, an instruction-heavy operation, which means, not surprisingly, salaries and benefits close to 73.5%. We're a people-heavy business, so as we look at our costs, we're mostly talking about people and the benefits associated with them. So with that, I'll end on the slide you've seen 3 or 4 times now. Priority number 1 remains addressing teacher decompression and then meeting the needs of our students and staff. So with that, Mr. Bullis.
Thank you, Mr. Meister. A very comprehensive review of the budget proposal for the superintendent. With that, we'll jump into the Q&A period. There were several questions, a number of questions submitted through the Google form that went out to all residents and to our families as we released the budget 2 weeks ago. We will tackle those, and we've also been taking notes on the various chatter and our social media platform as well. We'll start out with a question for our 2 school board members, Ms. Coker and Ms. Bailey. We've heard a lot about the superintendent's top priority and other initiatives in his budget. The first question goes to you all. What are the top priorities in the budget for each of you? We'll start out with Ms. Coker.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. For me, there's one rule, and that is a return on investment. And to our teachers, our students, and our software and our back office initiatives, to me, are going to give us the best return on our investment. So as we've said all along, going through the work sessions and these town halls, our teacher and staff decompression is the top priority. Second would be looking at the differentiated school-based funding, because that's going to give us a great return on the needs for our schools and our students in their classrooms. And then thirdly would be looking at the software upgrades that we can do for back office. It's kind of dear to my heart in that a payroll software can lead to a good return on efficiency and be able to help our back office staff. So that's one of the priorities that I have on my list.
Thank you. Ms. Bailey?
Well, I could make this real short and pretty much say ditto and turn my mic off. I'll add one difference. But obviously, I think if anyone has educated themselves about on this budget, watching all 3 town halls and our presentation, especially today at the work session, there can be no argument that our teachers are underpaid and that this has to be our top priority. So first and foremost would be to correct the salary and the compensation for our teachers and staff. Secondly, and near and dear to my heart, is the differentiated funding for our students. Having taught at a high-needs school, I understand that students with special needs require additional services and require then additional expenditures. It breaks my heart to see teachers on social media posting Amazon wish list. That should not be happening in a wealthy county like Chesterfield. We should be able to fund all of our students' needs. When I retired from the classroom, my husband said we were going to save money because I was no longer teaching and funding the needs for my classroom. So we need to really look hard at that and fund our teachers properly so that they can get the materials in their classroom for their students. I remember last year when we discussed this, I was told dug back 10 years and couldn't even find the iteration of the $51 per child allotment for student funding. We didn't even know where that number came from or began. And we took a long, hard look at how we fund our schools. We don't fund our schools properly right now from one school to another because a lot of the things that go on in a school are supported by PTAs. And we all know that the fundraisers in PTAs are not equitable from one side of the county to the other. And so we really need to address this in order to fund especially our high-need schools at a different level. And then finally would be the differentiated staffing. Again, return on investment for student outcome is to properly staff the schools. So those would be my top 3 priorities.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Ms. Bailey, Dr. Taylor, I'm going to come to you for the next question. I'm going to read Ms. Farmer's statement in our chat room here. Ms. Farmer says, I taught in Chesterfield from 1978 to 2008. Thank you for your service, first of all. They talked about salary compression most of the time I taught there, and it never happened. Just saying. Actually, she left as we were finishing up the tail end of the last salary decompression effort. We talked about that a little bit today at our work session. In 2005, 6, and 7, we went through this same exercise. We gave teachers raises in the range of 4 to 8%, depending on the year. But over the course of the past decade plus, we've not been able to afford a cost of living increase and a step increase. So Ms. Bailey, put that teacher hat back on first and address what that meant to a teacher in terms of respect and value when you only got one over the other instead of both. And then Dr. Taylor, if you can go back and talk about where, the budget document that we have out has provided lots of information, salary scales that you could see what it would mean. Address where people can find that information and the fact that it's not just teachers who are in the mix for that. Ms. Bailey?
Again, referring you, if you have the opportunity to watch the work session tonight, this afternoon, to go back and watch that, there were some comments that were made about valuing our teachers. And the truth of the matter is most teachers do not go into education because they think they're going to get rich. It's not about that for most people who enter the profession. However, they should be able to buy a home in the county that they live in, and they should be able to experience a quality of life that is, one that is warrants the college degree that they have obtained and the hours that they put into their profession and their job. And we do need to show them that we value them. It's also about attracting and retaining. It does happen about year 5 to 10 when teachers begin to look at the reality of their situation. And that's typically when they're starting to have a family and they're looking at, now I need to be responsible for my children and I have to save for their education. And they realize they have marketability outside of the education profession or across the river in a county that's going to pay them more. And that's when we begin to lose our high quality teachers. So we need to, as a school system and as a county, reflect on that and realize this isn't about paying teachers exorbitant sums. This is about showing them that we value what they do, and that they are certainly worth the salary that we're proposing. It is not even above market average. It doesn't even meet the market average. In fact, phase 1 only puts us 3rd or 4th in the region. It doesn't put us number 1. We're dead last right now. That's shameful, and that needs to be corrected.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Dr. Taylor?
Well, thank you, Ms. Farmer, for asking a question that can help shed some new light on something that we've talked about the last few times that we've been together during this town hall. And thank you, Ms. Farmer, for your dedicated service to Chesterfield County. The fact that you've been teaching about as long as I've been alive is pretty impressive, and we're grateful for your service, and we wish you were still in the system with us today. But how quickly we forget. The fact that you've heard about decompression as an ongoing issue for most of your teaching career is very telling. And that's the new piece of information that that's really important as part of this conversation, is that we don't forget, is that we don't find ourselves in this position again, that we set up structures in place moving forward so that we don't fall back into this habit during times of fiscal retrenchment. And so that we find ourselves in a place where we have reliable structures, where our teachers and other staff can look to a salary system that makes sense to them and that they can follow it over time and that they can plan for their financial futures and also plan to stay in Chesterfield County for their careers. So there's a number of documents that we would love to direct everybody to. At mychesterfieldschools.com, On that web page, there is a hot topic called budget down on the lower right-hand side. And one of the documents on that link is a handout. It's a PDF version of the piece of paper that I printed out earlier today. And it has a detailed outlay of what this looks like. In the very middle of that document, you've got some comparison scales of what a teacher scale would look like compared to what we have in place today. And that's pretty helpful because it will help the majority of our employees who are on a teacher scale or a teacher scale derivative. It's about 4,700 of our 8,000 plus employees use that scale or some version of it to kind of map out where you might land in the future on this system and to start planning ahead for the future of what that might look like. There's a couple of other resources that we'd like to draw your attention to. Earlier today, we had a school board work session on compensation, and that's all we talked about today. And there was a great presentation that was delivered by our Executive Director for Human Resources and Talent Management. Dr. Huff talked to the school board today about our issues with compression, but also how we could stay more competitive in the marketplace. That presentation can be found on the school board's webpage on Board Docs, and I believe we'll also link it to our budget documents on the mychesterfieldschools.com webpage link for budget. But this is also not a new issue, as Ms. Farmer pointed out, and very astutely. We talked about this last year. There's even a school board presentation from January 28th, 2020, that outlines what it was like to be a teacher newly hired in 2008 and then to track their salary progression over the subsequent 12 years. It's not pretty. And we know that, and we're tackling that head on, and that's why it's Dr. Doherty's number one budget ask in this year's budget presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. I'm going to come back to you for one more question, since you supervise human resources and the talent management workshop. Last year, we put forward a number for the community that 35% of the teachers who were with us 5 years before were gone. What type of data are we tracking to really truly understand the retention issue that we have within the school division?
So employee churn is a significant issue in Chesterfield, and it's a significant issue in the nation. As if the pandemic wasn't challenging enough, this is all happening during the backdrop of a national teacher shortage. We graduate fewer students from education schools at university that are prepared to teach than Fairfax County hires on an annual basis. It's just, we are not a state that produces a lot of teacher-ready candidates into the workforce. Nearly half of folks who enter the teacher workforce choose other professions by their 10th year of teaching, and that is significant. So our ability to recruit and retain strong teaching candidates and strong employees often does rely on salary. Mr. Meister, during his presentation, highlighted the reasons why people come to Chesterfield, the reasons why people stay in Chesterfield, and also the reasons why people leave. And no surprise, the reason that people come to Chesterfield and the reason that people stay in Chesterfield has nothing to do with salary, but it is a huge reason as to why people choose to leave.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Mr. Davis, going to come to you for the next two and put Dr. Pope in the on-deck circle. Mr. Davis, question's been asked about some recent media coverage regarding local residents wanting to donate PPE, specifically masks. And the question has been asked if we have enough funding in this year's budget to make sure that all of our staff coming back starting today have personal protective equipment, and what are we doing to address this in next year's budget should we need to?
Thank you, Mr. Bullis. We have invested significant sums in buying personal protective equipment back since August and September as we prepared for the first re-entry of students. This ranges from a variety of types of masks. We have regular cloth masks, we have N95 masks for those employees that need that. We have face shields. We have actually some clear mask for our speech therapist. We've spent significant sums on things like gloves and gowns and many cleaning supplies, things such as wipes that are used in the classroom. We've had adequate money in place, and there's a couple of trains of thought for the future. The federal government provided us through the CARES Act last year the funds that we needed to develop the stockpiles that we used in the fall and that we still have in our warehouse. And we've certainly gotten notice that there is federal funding available through one of the last acts of the previous administration. We believe we're going to get a significant sum that will enable us to continue to buy those supplies. And we've also put a placeholder in our operating budget of $1 million, just right now as kind of a bit of insurance until things really crystallize. So again, we've bought all the PPE, we've distributed, our schools take inventory every week, our warehouse team turns around any shortages or needs within 48 hours. I go out and visit schools and principals, and the one of many things they tell me that I really appreciate is they feel really good about the PPE supplies that they have, and they're well organized, and we've got everybody with the equipment and protective equipment that's necessary, both in the recent past, in the present, and in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. The next question to you deals with infrastructure. As our community knows, we are a growing community. Save for a blip this year, which we expect to return to normal next year, post-pandemic. In terms of student enrollment growth, we're a growing school division. We also have aging schools. Part of your job is to help balance the expenditures related to infrastructure. There's, as Mr. Meister mentioned, $1.9 million worth of enhancements for PAYGO and for other facilities upgrades. What type of money, what type of projects are we looking at along that end?
Well, when we look at our infrastructure, there's several buckets that I'll kind of try to briefly define. And the county has really assisted us in two what I'll call maintenance buckets, one of which is preventive maintenance. That's something really that was not funded up until about 12 months ago. And so now we have some contracts in place with some very reputable local HVAC vendors. They were even in our building today replacing filters. We've asked them to upgrade the filtration of our HVAC systems to meet the standards suggested by ASHRAE and other organizations suggesting we get to what's called MERV 13. So we've done that. We've also used preventive maintenance now on our roofs. We've hired a company just a few months ago. The big rainfall we had last week, we saw a significant reduction in the number of leaks that were reported. A second bucket is major maintenance. When we need to replace systems as they near the end of their useful life, or sometimes when they do break, I'm not going to say we're going to not continue to have critical breakdowns from time to time and have to replace a major system in a hurry. And we keep, again, multiple buckets of funding, but the county has really helped us. In recent years, you know, we've had a reasonable amount of money, but not enough to keep up with these. But the county went out and bought some bonds, and so we have nearly $60 million to spend in the next several years to do these major maintenance projects. I'm real excited about what we're going to be able to accomplish, but that's going to take a while. We're really looking out 5-10 years and see, as Mr. Bullis mentioned, those aging schools and systems, you know, that we're going to have to make those investments and perhaps eventually knock on the door and ask for even more funds from the county. But again, they've really stepped up and helped us get moving in the right direction. We've got some great momentum. We've replaced a lot of HVAC systems. And again, using the CARES money, we've improved the ventilation at our systems and added air purifiers in many of our classrooms where the ventilation standards that were in place, let's say in 1990, 1985, aren't to the same standards that we have today. So we've been able to supplement our ventilation equipment in many of our schools, and again, we feel real good about the environment that our students are walking back to. The final bucket I'll mention is our capital program. A bond referendum was passed in 2013. We've built several new schools, opened 3 this past fall. We've got 3 more that are going to open in the next several months, and we've just broken ground on Moseley Elementary School. So we're in the process of talking to the county about the next bond referendum and what we might be able to do, because the county's continuing to grow. We know where the pressure points are, and we still do have quite a few schools that are over capacity or very near capacity. So we're going to need to add new schools to give us some capacity. We also need to continue to replace some of those older schools. So we're just now entering that dialogue. The county's going to, I think, do the right thing in the long run and help us invest in our infrastructure so that, again, ranging from preventive maintenance to major maintenance to replacement buildings to new buildings giving us capacity. It's an exciting future to replace our infrastructure, and look forward to working with everybody involved to make it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Dr. Pope, the next 2 questions are going to come your way. One deals with special education and the other with CCPS Online, both of which have been referenced tonight in the chat section. Dolores wanted to encourage us to do more hiring in the special education arena to make sure that we're keeping up with IEPs, special education services, and mental health needs. Can you talk a little bit first about what we've done in the current budget cycle and recently, and then how our students with special needs are supported through the budget process?
Oh, absolutely, and thank you, Dolores, for that question. We definitely want to address very specifically what she's asking there. But to start more generally, as you've requested, Mr. Bullis, when we look at our budget each year, it very easily falls, every dollar we're talking about spending, into those 2 areas of our strategic plan. Assuring amazing learning experiences, which we all know on this panel and out there in the community, first and foremost starts with amazing teachers, right? That's how we provide amazing learning experiences, because that's where our written curriculum comes to life. And that means we have to keep the very best teachers, which of course means that I am absolutely supporting as well the salary decompression that we've been talking about this evening. Beyond providing those amazing learning experiences for every student, 12% of which in Chesterfield County are students with special needs, we also look at providing remarkable learning environments. And I think it's very understandable that during a pandemic, that means we've been really focused on the safety of our classrooms, the safety of our learning environments. And that can mean the purchase of PPE, the securing of a nurse for every school, special cleaning solutions, special furnishings, and all of those things I think assure all of our families that our students will be safe. But I think those assurances go even further with parents that have students with special health needs. So those investments are normal and probably even a little more extended in a pandemic year. From the instructional standpoint, of course, we invest dollars to serve all of our students, but very specifically, our students with special needs, we do have to buy specialized furniture, specialized equipment. We absolutely have to ensure that there's instructional software purchase that not all students will have access to, but based on a student's needs, we have to have that software or those learning applications available. And during a time such as a pandemic, we've even had to go out and expense purchasing an online testing ability so that we can ensure, much to Dolores's question, that we're not delaying eligibility determinations and providing services. So Chesterfield County Public Schools is under no waiver excusing us from meeting FAPE obligations. So of course, IEP services must be maintained and will continue to be maintained. That is normal in any year. It is especially important when we're in a pandemic. We are right now assessing, of course, as all teachers are across all of our students, but especially with our students with special needs, where they are in that learning process. And I feel very confident that in the budget proposed, we're going to be positioned well. IEP teams have one job. They look at an individual student, and they look at where that student is in their progression of learning. And they, as a team, in partnership with the parent, determine the supports and services that are needed to move that student forward. Our IEP teams are going to be looking at the VDOE recommended COVID support services, kind of post-pandemic. What are they recommending we consider as far as supports? And I believe this budget will allow our IEP teams making decisions based on individual student needs to fully meet those needs with CCPS approved providers. So that's what gives me assurance. I will say that My confidence in the budget and my confidence in our IEP teams working together with parents to deliver those services through this budget. If it's any further reassurance, I will also say that our school district, like all school districts, we operate under something called a maintenance of effort. And maintenance of effort simply means that school districts are mandated to invest dollars each year that are equal or more than the previous year. I would say that not only will we be equaling our investment, but absolutely increasing it as we move into this next budget round, because we know that our students are going to have needs. And we're a school district that believes in meeting the needs of the whole child, which is Maslow's as well as Bloom's needs, and getting all of our learners right back on track.
Thank you, Dr. Pope. Keep your light on.
Okay.
It's coming back to you. This week across the county, families are starting to talk about those with middle school and high school students scheduling for next year. Earlier this week, we opened up registration for next school year for CCPS Online, which is our online school for middle and high school students. The questions come up and some chatters popped up in our chat box about costs associated with CCPS Online. The students take that for free up to a typical course schedule, but then pay for something over, or how does that work?
Yes, a great question, and it's certainly a reasonable concern that parents would have when they see that registration opening up. They are immediately thinking, what's coming next? What will next year's models or options look like? And I certainly don't want to miss an opportunity for my child. So those questions are very timely. But this is actually a registration that even before COVID always opened up at this time of year. And the parents who typically are registering children right now are the parents who already foresee in their secondary students following academic year that there will be a need to take courses beyond the normal course load, courses that would fill the child's schedule, and then there would be a course that there would not be room for in the normal school day. Great examples of this would be a student moving into a specialty center, and many of our rising ninth graders really love to get their personal econ and finance class over with, for example. It just frees opportunities up later in their high school journey to have another class be woven in. When a student is accelerating, when they're taking more than the required load, when they're trying to get ahead or free a space in their schedule, there has always been, and there is a charge for that. We do always consider each family's needs, and if there is a need for financial assistance, we absolutely have that available as well. We would never want to hold a child back from that opportunity. The other question I think that the listeners may be asking in there is, well, what if I want to pursue CCPS Online as just an option for my child next year? Maybe we don't know how this is all going to turn out, and I might just want to keep my child virtual next year. That is not necessarily what this registration is for. Even when we look to this summer, I know Dr. Daugherty, you spoke so beautifully at our first town hall to this, and maybe I'll allow you to jump in and talk about the opportunity that will be free for all of our students this coming summer.
Thank you, Dr. Pope. So the goal that we will present in March to our school board is to offer summer school, and we are looking at a virtual program as well as a face-to-face program for all of our students when you think about kindergarten through 8th grade, and opportunities that we have to help students with any academic gaps or opportunities to continue to improve their education. So we are looking and using the CARES funding that we are planning for this summer and especially next summer to make sure that we offer our summer school programs, knowing that it will be about a 4-week program because we do start school next year, August 23rd.
Thank you, Dr. Daugherty. Mr. Meister, I don't know that we've actually called on you for a question after you've presented the first 2 times, so we're not going to let you off that easy the 3rd time. Mr. Harrison from the Bermuda district submitted a question through the Google Doc that says, will the school budget decrease if enrollment continues to decline? So can you talk about a conservative student enrollment projection that perhaps we put forward, and what happens if we don't meet that target?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I appreciate that. I was really hoping I wouldn't get a question, but in all seriousness, as we think about enrollment, Over the course of a longer period of time, we will, of course, scale our teachers and support personnel to the number of students that we ultimately have. We're a little bit lucky coming into this year with the governor's proposed budget that he has put forward something called a hold harmless provision that will allow us to not make any sort of harsh or rash decisions on reducing staffing before we know what longer term enrollment will ultimately look like. What we've done this year is we've taken a look at where our enrollment is this year. We've looked at where we expect it to be next year with expected, I think Dr. Doherty uses the term redshirted kindergartners coming back, homeschoolers that would likely come back. And we've taken a really conservative view on what those enrollment pictures will look like next year. From that level is what we built our staffing model on, is what's proposed in the budget. Should the numbers increase from there, we'll of course adjust. I don't think we will see much reduction, quite honestly, from the relatively conservative enrollment projections we have in today based on both the growth within the county and what we have already started to observe with children coming back to school in this second term as people have started to welcome our elementary school children back in. But over the course of a long term, yes, if our enrollment does decrease, we will have to adjust for that, although I don't view that, given the macro environment within Chesterfield County, that to be the likely outcome over the long term.
Thank you, Mr. Meister. Just for a quick time check, we've got about 15 minutes left. We want to leave time at the end for some closing comments. Dr. Taylor, 2 questions for you. Both are along the lines of compensation. One, seeking clarification on who exactly is in the salary study. And 2, there's some comments popping up in the chat box about benefits and retirement benefits. Can you talk about not only our effort to attract folks, but to retain our folks as well?
Certainly. I'll talk first about the salary study. The salary study does not encompass all of our full-time school personnel. We have approximately 8,300 full-time employees in the school system, and only 5,200 were studied as part of the salary study. The salary study focused primarily on school-based staff members, those that work off of the teacher scale, assistant principals and principals, persons in those positions. What you'll see in our budget is not just a 3-year or 3-phase plan, but there's really a last group that's not articulated, and that is all of our other employees that were not included in the salary study, and that would be something that we would want to address as the 4th phase of our salary study plan. And Mr. Bullis, I'm going to have to rely on you for the second question that you asked there.
That's okay. The question was our focus on not just attracting new teachers, but retaining the ones that we have and looking at the full benefits package that we offer as well.
Absolutely. You'll see in our budget a couple of items. You'll see an annual increase to our VRS expense. As public employees, those who work for the school system are eligible for the state retirement system. And we, as the employers, have a required percentage that we put forward to match the employee percentage that they put forward towards their state retirement plan. So that does go up on a pretty annual basis. Some years it goes down when the state's retirement plan is fully funded. It is not. And so we do contribute to that, and that is something that helps give our employees a little bit more security. Another benefit that's tied to employment in Chesterfield County and in a lot of other places is their health care benefit. We are projecting that there will be somewhere in the neighborhood of a 4 to 5% increase in the employer share. That's the Chesterfield County Public Schools share of the increase that comes in our health care expenses. Now, a lot of folks at home have made this question. They've asked whether or not will that offset my increase in the salary that would come if we did this big decompression? And the answer is the increase would be borne by the school system, not by the employee. So you would get the full benefit from a salary increase. We have not figured out what our insurance increase will be yet because it's done on a calendar annual basis and would be 6 months after the budget goes into effect. But we are covering in a very conservative way what we project for the employer share. So that would not be a cost that we would pass on to our employees. We do make every effort we can to defray that expense so that we can keep the very best teachers in the Commonwealth in Chesterfield County.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. While we're talking about our outstanding employees, we want to give a quick shout out to our principals who celebrated National School Principals Week last week, or Virginia School Principals Week last week, and this week is National School Counseling Week. So thank you to all of our school counselors who work for us as well. Ms. Coker, Ms. Bailey, two questions rolled into one. How will you work with your counterparts on the Board of Supervisors to express our needs? And no name on that one. David wants to know, what can the community do to support you?
Thank you. Very good questions and important questions. I can say that I know all of the school board members are working collaboratively with the Board of Supervisors. I talk regularly with my counterpart in the Bermuda district, Jim Engel, and I know that we are all committed to making sure that we are doing the best for Chesterfield and for CCPS and making sure that we are moving us forward. And the second part of that question is, what can the community do? Stay in tuned with our work sessions that we have upcoming this month. And I know I would love to hear from the Bermuda district, as I know Ms. Bailey would love to hear from the Dale district, as far as what are your priorities? Where do you think CCPS should be looking to fund our budget? So reach out to us via email, and we'd love to hear from you.
And I would, again, echo everything that Ms. Coker has just said. We often communicate with our counterparts on the Board of Supervisors. In fact, just this morning, we had a liaison meeting where Chair Mr. Harder and myself joined with Leslie Haley and Jim Engel for a presentation on the capital improvement plan. And we had some around the edges discussion about the salary and the entire budget. But we are often in communication with them. And I think as a community, one of the most important things that you can do is to educate yourself on this budget, and then also to educate yourself on how this process unfolds. As much as we say we want to fund this, we have to recognize that Mr. Meister pointed out there's a $39 million gap here, that the funds need to come from somewhere. And when I say to educate yourself, is to understand that the appropriating body for those funds is the Board of Supervisors. I believe wholeheartedly that it is our job to show the community our needs. And I very much stand behind Dr. Daugherty in the process of putting forth a needs-based budget, because if we want to be a first-rate school system, and we are saying these are the things that we need in order for that to occur, but we don't have any means to raise revenue. We, as mentioned, 44% of our budget comes from the county government, and so those funds, which they control, are what are going to determine what gets funded in that $39 million shortfall. So I think as a community, it's critically important for you to educate yourself on that process and understand the role of your electeds, and then reach out to them as you deem appropriate, and explain to your elected officials where you think the priority should be for your tax dollars, because it's your tax dollars that we're up here advocating for. And so as you're looking at your tax dollars going to the county government, then look at the appropriating body and say, this is where I want my tax dollars to go. And that would be the number one thing that I would want the community to do, is to educate yourself and then understand the process and then advocate where you think your tax dollars should go. And if you think it should go to your child's school, your child's teachers, to keep our high-quality teachers, then let your appropriating body know that.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. We're going to get back to you in just a minute with some closing remarks and to Dr. Doherty with one final question. But Dr. Pope, you get the next to last question. There was some conversation earlier, and Samantha asked through the Google form about the use of PTAs to support schools. Ms. Bailey talked about teachers paying out of their pocket, and hopefully she's seen a lot of savings in the past 10 months as being out of the classroom. The differentiated funding and differentiated staffing models that we're talking about, what might that look like? Granted, each school might have the autonomy to meet its own needs, but what might that look like?
So one of the things that we appreciate about the differentiated staffing and especially the differentiated funding for schools is that we have to recognize none of us sitting on this stage have the same needs one to the next, and none of our students have the same needs one to the next. This funding allows schools who best know the needs of their students to make decisions on what they want to invest in. Now, that doesn't mean that schools can go out and just spend the money on anything. We do want to make sure that purchases align to our district vision, to our strategic plan as a district. And what we typically do is go through a procurement process that will spell out in an RFP, for example, all of the requirements that we're looking for in products that might support elementary literacy, for example. We would then review any vendors who respond using our county partners to walk us through that process. We might select multiple vendors that provide wonderful products that would support our plans as a district, our direction as a district, and still allow schools then a menu of choices for which they could use those funds based on the needs of their specific students and their performance results across the groups of their students. So that is how schools could use the funds and provide them autonomy, but still stay within kind of that general lane that we're all going down as a school division.
Thank you, Dr. Pope. Dr. Doherty, you're going to get the last question, and then we'll go to Ms. Bailey for some closing remarks. You've used some fairly strong language. We asked this question at the last town hall. You said it would be a failure if we did not get an appropriate compensation plan in place. Why is this so important to you?
People in education never go into education to make money. They go in because they love children. I've been in education for a while. The one thing I've learned in my time in education is that you respect people, you honor the profession, and you make sure that you do your very best for your children and your colleagues. I'm very passionate about this because I believe everyone knows we are shortchanging our teachers. We've been shortchanging our teachers for over a decade. I wasn't here a decade ago. For me to push this aside and to look the other way would be unprofessional of me, I would say slap education in the face, because every one of our teachers works extremely hard. I'm very passionate about this because the ability to fund this is there. I can say, being here 2.5 years, that any dime that the county has given us, we are accountable for. We have shown that. We've showed integrity in our budget process. We've showed integrity in dealing with our colleagues. So the question is, do you believe that we have the integrity to live up to our budget? Do you believe that what we are saying is accurate? If you don't believe that, then the numbers are different than what we have. If you do believe that we have the integrity to spend our budget, if you do believe that we have the integrity of educators to properly fund the system, then you have to provide the funding. And I believe by not funding teacher decompression, we will have failed our teachers, our staff members, but most importantly, we will have failed our students. And what drives Chesterfield County is the outstanding educational system that people move to this area for their children. This is not about anyone on this stage. This is about the opportunity to make sure that we continue the quality of education for years to come.
Okay, well, thank you. I'd like to first thank everybody for joining us this evening, and especially to thank the staff who has endured 3 of these town hall meetings. And I don't mean to say that endured as I think they absolutely have a passion for Chesterfield County and our school system, and their passion shows in their hard work and the hours that they have put into this budget. I think as a community, we have worked very hard to be very transparent and communicate with you so that you can understand this budget and understand why we need these funds in order to support our teachers and our students. And I would be remiss if we signed off tonight without thanking our hundreds and hundreds of elementary school teachers and bus drivers and everyone that went back into the classrooms today. Thank you so much. And I went around with several schools with Dr. Daughtery today, and it was so adorable seeing the kids sitting in their classrooms. And every single one that we asked, were they happy to be there, even though it was snowing outside? They all said yes, they were thrilled to be in school. And to all the parents that drove them there and tried to help out in any way, we appreciate that as well. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, and we will have more work sessions, so tune in for those as we continue to examine this budget and work through this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. As she just noted, we have several work sessions coming up. We have a work session and a business meeting next Tuesday, and that will be the chance for the community to weigh in with a public hearing on the school board's budget that they are considering right now that's been proposed by Dr. Daugherty. There will also be a public hearing on our proposed capital improvements plan. We look forward to hearing from you, the community, next Tuesday and over the course of the next month as we prepare to have the school board adopt a budget, approve a budget, and then send it on to the Board of Supervisors for review. Once again, all of the information that we've gone over tonight is available on our website, mychesterfieldschools.com. We encourage and ask all of our residents to become informed and engaged in this discussion, as it holds the key to the future of Chesterfield County. As always, thank you for your continued support of Chesterfield County Public Schools. Have a great evening.